Good morning, and you're very welcome to this morning's Signpost webinar. My name is Pat Murphy, Head of Environment Knowledge Transfer with Teagasc, and I'm joined this morning by Fran Igoe, who's Regional Coordinator with LAWPRO, Noel Meehan, Head of the ASSAP Programme, and Shaun Roarty. Shaun, you'll be helping us with the questions this morning. Good morning to you all.
Yes. Morning, Pat.
Good morning. I suppose about 2 years ago, the ASSAP program had been up and running for a couple of years, and we were having a problem in a specific area in that we were asking farmers to take on measures to improve water quality, but we had no funding to support that. And we approached our two parent departments, Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage, and the Department of Agriculture, to see was there any possibility of getting funding to support the measures that we were asking farmers to take on board. I'm delighted that 2 years down the line, a funding mechanism under an EIP has been put in place, and we're going to describe that to you this morning. Fran, you're very welcome. You were the one who has put a lot of the work into designing, planning, tendering for, and hopefully now implementing this EIP initiative.
Thank you, Pat, and hello, everybody. First of all, Pat, I would love to take credit for all of this work, but I can't. I have to acknowledge everybody who's helped out, both from Teagasc, from Dairy Industry Ireland, of course, my colleagues in LAWPRO as well, and of course, the farmers who have helped us inform this process. Shall I drive on with the presentation?
Yes, please.
Great. Okay, so again, hello everybody. My name is Fran Igoe. I work with the Local Authority Waters Programme, and we're a shared service for local authorities to try and help Ireland meet its objectives under the Water Framework Directive. So in other words, to try and promote water quality as a public good. We work with a lot of different agencies, and of course we work with colleagues in the agricultural sector as well. And this presentation is about that piece which Pat has introduced. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to talk about how we came about to develop the water EIP, what's involved, and then Noel Meehan from Teagasc will follow with a more detail around the measures itself. So the title there is Combining Targeted Measures and the European Innovation Partnership Funding to Deliver Water Improvement for the Public Good. And this is very important. There's a purpose to this, why we're doing this. It is about restoring and protecting water quality for everybody in Ireland. And why is that important? Well, we know from the international experience is that Ireland is seen as being a very sustainable country in terms of what we produce. It's important that we maintain our sustainability credentials, and water quality very much underpins that. And this is a given. This is something that we need to do. But there's lots of other dependencies as well on good and clean water quality, including the shellfish industry. These often support marginal communities where there won't be much other opportunities in terms of employment. And the feedback we're getting from the marine sector is that they have concerns around water quality. So it's important that our aquaculture and our inshore fisheries do have clean water. Recreation, we know that clean water, sustains a better quality of environment from an aesthetic point of view. And this has become very important through the COVID-19 experience. People are now turning towards nature. They get it. It's very important for mental health and for well-being. And of course, if we want to develop our tourism industry, water quality underpins that. The quality of our blue waves, for example, are dependent on good and clean water quality. And in addition to this, even from the point of view of industry, standard industries, say, for example, even for the IT sector, they need clean, raw water coming to their plants for cooling, for example. So it's important that we do maintain water quality from that point of view. So there's a whole range of reasons that we should be looking after water quality. And we know from the public consultations that we've done on the river basin management plans that the public are looking for this, and the public appreciate water through different lenses. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's restoring and protecting what we have as a precious resource. And we're very fortunate in the west of Europe that we have some of the best water resources in the European area. And then finally, European designations, we have some really important species of interest, wildlife species of interest. everything from salmon to freshwater pearl mussels, sea lamprey there you can see, and crayfish. All of them need clean water, and then other animals that might feed on them, such as otters, for example. Again, they're protected, and also they require clean. So the whole food chain, in other words, requires clean water, and this is very much part of our culture. You know, the salmon, the story of the salmon of knowledge, Fimacool, Cuchulainn, all these stories, you know, again, go back and they, you know, show that our history, our cultural history is intertwined with clean water. So that just kind of sets the background. I think it's important that we understand why it's important. And then if we look at the, you know, the actual situation today, we can see that there's a range of sectors impacting on water quality, a range of pressures. The EPA have done a huge amount of work here. They have a fantastic network of monitoring sites, some of the best in the world. The data is really good. It follows international best practice in terms of standards. And from that data, it informs us in terms of managing water quality from forestry, urban development, etc., including agriculture. We can see from the river-based management plan that between the last two cycles, the current and the previous one, that water quality is, agriculture is the biggest pressure, and also it's going in the wrong direction. So it's important that we try and address that. A basic consideration with regards to managing risk from agricultural enterprises, irrespective of the type, is, you know, the way we look at it is there's three main areas to be focusing on. One is obviously the land suitability, you know, the local weather patterns, etc. The second one is to ensure that people actually comply with the mandatory measures that are there in terms of the directives and the GAP regulations, etc., that everybody complies. Because if you have even a single operator who's not compliant, if the risk is high, that can be the equivalent of a wastewater treatment plant going wrong. So it's important that we have good compliance. And then thirdly, often we have leaky situations. So in addition to the, let's say, mandatory measures, there may be a need to put in, I suppose, measures to intercept that leakiness. So for example, soil water that might run off land after spreading of slurry, and there's a rain, you know, a sudden cloudburst, to pick up those situations, which are not mandatory, but it's important that we deal with them in terms of best practice from a water stewardship point of view. And that's really what this is about. We're looking at these non-mandatory supplementary measures which complement and help farmers, you know, ensure that their enterprise is as risk-proofed as possible in terms of managing the water quality risk from their farm. And this then, of course, underpins the agricultural sustainability support and advisory program that Pat talked about, in terms of that's looking at that whole area, breaking the pathways, putting in measures to intercept you know, these kind of surface water runoffs, and where we can make gains in terms of nitrate use efficiency as well. The background to this was that, you know, after the second cycle of the river-based management plan, it was, preparing for the second cycle of the river-based management plan, it was, you know, identified that these supplementary measures or these additional measures would be necessary. And that's when the ASSAP program was set up by the Department of Agriculture, with housing and the dairy sector, collaborating with Teagasc as well. So, types of measures we're talking about would be simple stuff like riparian buffers, sediment traps in the right place, intercepting those pathways, and then obviously measures to deal with, say, pesticide loss or nitrates as well. So, you know, a range of measures across the board. But the big challenge, as Pat said, was that, you know, we didn't have funding to support farmers who, you know, want to put in measures, but for example, that measure might be expensive. Let's say if a wetland, for example, the cost involved might be prohibitive. And that was a feedback that the ASSAP advisors were getting on the ground. So it's very welcome that we have this EIP now coming down the tracks. This is put together by the Department of Agriculture in partnership with the Department of Housing. It's a European funded process. It's quite a competitive and onerous process. And you can see there the scale of it, 50 million going towards farmers, and then the Department of Housing put up match funding to help with the administration of it. We in LAWPRO put together an application in partnership with Teagasc and Dairy Industry Ireland, because we felt it was important for us to get into the space and support everybody in this area, and that's what we've done. So, but there was a lot of work behind the scenes to try and get us to that point. It is a partnership between the three partners, as I mentioned, but also we're supported by a range of other partners as well in terms of trying to deliver this. There's lots of innovations that have been built into it, including a rainwater management plan, etc. I'll explain in a minute. And the ambition is very high for 15,000 farmers ideally to get into the scheme. We will be reliant on the ASSAP program to help us, but also there'll be a project team and also community advisors as well. We will be following the catchment science developed by the EPA and colleagues in the catchment science section of LAWPRO, and of course working with the departments. In the round, this is what it looks like. It's a very busy slide, but there's a lot going on because there's a lot of moving parts in it. There will be an operational team, a project team. We'll have a lot of work there on the GIS, the tracking, the mapping, all that stuff will have to be done in terms of the measures. Working then with the communities, there'll be community enablers also in place on the ground. Working with the industries, and not just dairy, but also beef industry, forestry as well, and a good focus on tillage as well. So for the first time, we'll be really working this area and collaborating with the co-ops, including a Dairy Gold, looking at the sustainability schemes that they're developing to provide bonuses for their milk suppliers. This is all an exciting area, and we're delighted to be part of this. And the whole point of this is to develop learnings, and then those learnings feed into policy. So we have a joined up approach to all of this. We are building on the learnings from the Teagasc programs, such as the EPA-funded Smart Buffer Zone project, the Watermark, etc., and working in collaboration with the Agricultural Catchments program as well, the ASSAP program. So this is very much a joined-up thing, and also we'll have a big research element feeding into that as well. But we're very clear on this. The 50 million coming from Europe, that's going to the farmers. We designed it that way, and that's the way we want it. Everything else is we're trying to look after that from the point of view of either Department of Housing funding or bringing in and being smart about how we fund the research using existing funding programs and collaborating with everybody to do that. There's a lot of work has been done already to inform this. The ASSAP advisors have been out. You can see the table there, in front of you. This is the feedback from the work that they've done in terms of, what are the issues that need to be addressed. The whole list there. So this has informed the process, and Noel will go through this in more detail. In terms of the supports, then we have as I said, we'll have the advisory program, and also the project will take on some advisors, and we'll have those community animators as well. But we'll be building in with partnerships with other areas as well. One of the key innovations is what we call a rainwater management plan. So basically following the rainwater from the sky right down through the farm onto the receptor, the lake, the river, whatever it is. This is based on some of the work that we've been doing in the urban side of things and forestry, and it's very simple. It helps us visualize what's happening with the stressor, let's say, if it's phosphate, nitrate, sediment, because water is a vector. Water is going to carry it, and when you have a lack of water, you've got a drought, it's still water is the issue. So the rainwater management plan, the idea is to work off the EPA maps, and then walk the land with the farmer who will know their land best in terms of what happens during a heavy rainfall event, and then pick up the areas that need to be addressed and to intercept those pathways. If it's a nitrate issue, then a nitrate vulnerable plan will be put together, and similar to pasture base. And the idea is then to do calculations that will save the farmer money, but also in terms of reducing nitrate loss that will be surplus. A simple example of how the process would work is here's an example of a farm here. The rain is falling obviously on the farm itself, but also land upslope of the farm, causing problems during heavy weather events. So the idea is to figure out, okay, where's the rainwater wanting to go, and then put in our measures to either deflect that water if it's clean water, or deal with it in terms of interception measures to filter out pollutants if necessary, and do all that with the farmer. In this case, simple example, we would put a bund to divert the water coming off the upslope area away from the farm, maybe cover the slurry round tower there. That payment would be covered maybe through TAM. So we'd be trying to pick on and identify other funding schemes as well to plug in so we can maximize the benefit of the project. And then other risk areas then, bund them off, for example. Then moving down into the landscape onto the farm itself. Here's an example from North Cork. Worked through by Ian McConnery, who works with the Teagasc program, and you can see there the issues that have been identified in terms of the risky areas that need to be addressed. These will be ranked, work with the farmer, and then some of those that are, let's say, of a biodiversity benefit or a climate benefit, we'll identify those too, and we're looking at trying to provide bonus payments to reward, I suppose, extra benefits as well, because there's a multi benefit project. It's not just about the ASSAP, it's broader than that. It will bring in, natural water retention thinking as well, and also climate thinking as well. And the rainwater management plan very much speaks to that, because we're following rain. If you think about cloudbursts, thinking about heavy weather events, we're trying to pick up all that type of stuff as well. So manage these landscapes into the future as well. So once that is worked through, then the advisor then will bring it back to the project team. These issues will be I suppose measures will be ranked, and then the payment will be agreed with the farmer. We'll have a kind of an identified payment program, and Noel will go through that. And then the thing will be mapped out in terms of us being able to see where everything goes from our point of view, from the science point of view, it's very important so we can actually see, okay, what are we doing in the landscape, what's working, what's not working, and we can then tweak and adjust it. And the other thing is it would allow us as well deal with issues that might arise around, say, for example, Natura 2000 sites, protected areas, archaeology areas. We will look after all of that stuff in terms of the project team so that the advisors are freed up just to do the walkover with the farmer and work through the solutions, because it's a solutions-focused approach. We want to keep it really tidy. We don't want to have extra paperwork here. We'll try and interface as much as we can with existing apps, etc. So we try and keep this very smart, very simple, and it's targeted. We'll be approaching the farmers. This won't be a big open call. I know I might talk about that in a minute. It'll be very much about, identifying the areas that are risk and then going through and supporting farmers to address what needs to get done in their enterprise. We will have this results-based element to it. It won't be as sophisticated as some of the ones in the acres cooperation area, because it's not a results-based program as such, but there will be some kind of a payment built in terms of the efficacy of the measure. And as I mentioned there, where there's a climate or biodiversity benefit as well, we'll build that on. So it's been, we're nearly there, we're working through it, but just to give you a flavour, this is the type of thinking, and we've been building on the learnings from, for example, the Wild Atlantic Life Project and the Nature Project and other programs like the IRD, the Hollow Farming for the Blue Dot EIP, and also the Duncannon EIP down in Wexford as well. So we're looking for additionality as well, working with our collaborators, and because DII, Dairy Industry Ireland, are partners in the project, this is a great integrated approach. Working with the co-ops in terms of, getting the industry support is really important in terms of, encouraging people to get involved. But more than that, now that the co-ops themselves are actually putting together their own water stewardship programs, bonus programs, payments for farmers, the idea will be if we can integrate the EIP with those payments, you get an extra benefit in terms of financial incentive for the farmer, and also in terms of us, in terms of joining up and reduce the bureaucracy. So this is an area that we are looking at to try and maximise the benefit both for the environment and for the farmer, avoid confusion, encourage best practice, etc., and really demonstrate true sustainability. Now, this is a European innovation project. So there's a lot of actions within that we have to satisfy for the Commission. The European Commission are not just handing out money for the fun of it. We have to demonstrate that the money is going to be well spent and have it all structured. So the project will be looking after all that. But just to give you a flavour of what's involved in the background, so these things just don't happen. You have to put together, a good team, have a good structure. We're very lucky in LAWPRO. We have Tipperary County Council in the background who have a lot of experience in administering the financial side of it. So we'll be, leveraging that knowledge and then working with the ASSAP program, with Teagasc, with all the lads, in the co-ops, sustainability advisors, and the broader community to try and do this. This is going to be adaptive management. We're going to be learning as we go along, and ultimately this should inform policy, wider policy, with the departments. And the departments, both Ag and Housing, will be a part of the Operational Committee. So those learnings will be done in real time. So look, some take-home messages before I pass on to Noel. This is the largest EIP ever undertaken by the state. It's going to be it's a big deal. It's a great opportunity. The idea is that we'll be advisor-led with the farmer, promoting water stewardship. So the idea is to help people figure out what can they do in their land. Rather than being told what to do, it's about learning on the ground. What can we do? Every farmer is different. We know that every challenge is different, and the farmer knows best in terms of figuring out the solutions with that advice, and with the background, of course, of the EPA maps and science. So we're following that catchment science principles, as I mentioned, targeted actions, focusing water quality, but bringing in those multiple benefits. As I said, this is all about the public good at the end of the day for everybody, including the local community. We'll be targeting all sections of agriculture as much as possible, and we aim to integrate with sustainability initiatives. We are also talking to Uisce Éireann, OPW, and also at the National Federation, Group Water Schemes, etc. on this. We're very much about explaining why. Why is this important for the public? We'll have a communications piece on that as well. But it won't work unless we do have strong support from this industry and from the sectors, both in terms of the advisory services and also people on the ground. So Pat, look, that's just me. I think I'll pass over to Noel if that's okay. I hope I've left you enough time here, Noel. Thanks.
Okay, no, we're good for time. Thanks, Fran. That was very clear. You might stop sharing there and allow Noel to share. Just to remind you, the question and answers, if you have any questions, to put them in there. We've a number of questions in there already. Noel, you look to be ready to go.
Good morning, everybody. I hope you can see the screen there okay.
Fine.
So yeah, look, at Fran, I suppose, give you a flavour for where this came from and the kind of the high level policy and the thinking behind it and the reasoning for it. And I suppose what I'm going to just do is maybe get down to bits of the nuts and bolts of how it's going to all work out. But just before we do that, some acknowledgements there in the bottom, and Fran acknowledged people as well, but I just want to put those names there. But also from the Department of Agriculture, both Jack Nolan and Ted Massey played a big, huge role in getting this over the line, as well as Colin Byrne there in the Department of Housing. So just to acknowledge those three individuals as well. So the presentation outline, I'm just going to look at eligibility for farmers, what the application process is, then verification and payment, so nuts and bolts of the scheme itself. The water EIP measures, so what we're going to be looking to fund. Just give an example of how it might look for on a typical farm, and then just a wrap-up summary of the presentation. So the water EIP eligibility. So access would be prioritised. We're going to have a prioritisation on this, and farmers would be approached to make applications. So as Fran said earlier on, you know, this isn't an open call for like an acres there where farmers come to us. It'll be the other way around. It'll be the water EIP going to farmers, and that'll be based on an eligibility criteria that I'll go through now in a second. So farmers in the following areas will be potentially eligible to access funding. So we're looking at 4 different tiers. So those are farms in cycle 2 and cycle 3 PAs that have already had an ASSAP farm assessment. So ASSAP would have visited these farms, identified areas where there's issues and mitigation actions, and where those mitigation actions are yet to be implemented, which is unfortunately the case, we'll be able to provide some funding for those farms. So that's the restore water quality objective with the tier 1s. So the tier 2 farms in cycle 3, so the coming PAs that are going to be opening shortly once the third river based management plan has been published. So farms in those PAs are within a catchment that has a community led water quality initiative. So you're looking at, you know, maybe Rivers Trust, or you're looking at National Federation of Water Scheme kind of areas. And these have a nutrient or sediment or pesticide issue as identified by the EPA or local authority. So this is a restore water quality objective as well. So that's the second tier farms. The third tier farms is very similar, except it's a protect water quality function. So there's PAs out there that have a protect water quality function, as in they're not prioritized by the EPA as having a nutrient, sediment, or pesticide issue, but they still have they're still in a PA, or they still have a community-led initiative. Those will be in tier 3, and they have a protect water quality function. So restore is where we're trying to get water quality back up to good status. Protect is where we're trying to maintain it at good status or high status. And then tier 4 would be other farms outside of the above. So I suppose just to put it out there, this is for measures not covered by regulatory requirements. So these are additional measures or supplementary measures as they're called. So we're also obviously not going to be double funding here. So for farmers is in acres with a riparian margin, the water EIP will not be funding the same riparian margin. So it's just important to note that no double funding is permitted. And the final thing is I suppose this is to get measures implemented on the ground. It's not to bulk up an income, and I know that's not it won't be seen that way, but it's just to put it out there that it's not an income support scheme. This is to actually fund specific measures that are going to do a specific job with regards to water quality. So the application process. So farms that have already been assessed, so it's about nearly 4,000 or around 4,000 now at this stage that have been assessed. So they'll be contacted and offered the opportunity to apply to the EIP. And then new farms, once we go past that, because we're hoping to get 15,000 farms in it altogether. So new farms going forward, they'll have to be selected based on scientific assessment. So this all has to be based on science. We can't just start picking farms, scattergun approach. It needs to be targeted. It needs to be based on local catchment assessments. needs to be based on desk studies and information that will be compiled either by the likes of LAWPRO or community schemes or community-based projects where they have a scientific basis for that, because this is important, because if we don't have that basic information around the landscape and the pathways and all that kind of stuff, we won't know what the actual proper measures are. So we need to have that information so as we can target the appropriate measures. So is it a nitrogen vulnerable area? Is it a phosphorus vulnerable area? What are the pathways and so on? So that science-based element has to be there to support the targeting of these measures. And then the farms will be assessed along the lines of what we have from the ASSAP farm assessment as it happens at the minute. So we have a system for doing that in order to generate the rainwater management plan that Fran was showing you there. So it's the same process that we're using, and then that will be used to identify the mitigation action, the appropriate mitigation action, and where to locate it. The location is very important as well, and we need to be able to capture that information as well. And then based on that, we have a menu of options, and with consultation with the farmer and the advisor, we will select the suitable EIP measure, and then that'll be submitted in for into the EIP for assessment. So that's the application process. I suppose the next part of it is the verification and payment part of it. So LAWPRO will be responsible for processing and payment. So Fran mentioned about the 50 million. The 50 million is the piece that I'm after going through a minute ago. The 10 million this is for the administration of it, and this is the bit I'm going to look at here now. So the processing of an application will be done by LAWPRO. So initial taking in of the application and going through and the various checks that needs to be done on that. Then I suppose the next part is, once the application is accepted, is that the farmer is given the green light to go ahead and put in the measures as per the plan, and then the validation of that. So how are those going to be validated? We're hoping to have this very similar to what's currently going on with the acres and AgriSnap, that you have a similar system that we'll be able to verify through a system like that measures have gone in, particularly for physical features and things like that. There may be some need for some farms to be visited to see that a measure has gone in, but by and large, we'll be hoping that we can do it via technology that's out there. And then payment will issue for the EIP measure. We will also have a big role in reporting and all this, so we need to develop systems that can capture all this data and report it. Obviously, we're getting so much money, there has to be a strong level of oversight and governance on this to make sure that the money is going where it says it's supposed to be going, and obviously that the farmers are implementing measures as required. Our aim, I think Fran mentioned this as well, is to keep the administrative burden as low as possible. So that's both on the advisor, on the farmer, and on the processing part of it as well. But you'd appreciate that, with that ambition, you're still going to have a certain amount of administration work and checks and so on to be done. But we do aim to keep that as low as possible and to use as much technology as possible that's out there to help lessen that burden. With that in mind, we've had to undergo very rapid development of new IT systems, and we're in the process of doing that. But that is a key. It's all brand new IT that we have to develop. So that's in the process of being developed, and it's taken time, but we're making good progress at the same time. So what are the EIP measures that we might be looking at? And these are just a flavour of them. It's not an exhaustive list, but it's just to give a flavour for what we might be looking at with regards to EIP measures. So I suppose I mentioned about having it based on some sort of science or some sort of idea as to what the pressures are, and a big part of that would be using the existing information that's out there from the EPA, for example, with the PIP maps that they've generated, and then they've also have these targeted measures maps. It's kind of a blue and orange map that some of you might be aware of. So that gives you a flavour for where we need to be targeting measures. So that'll be the kind of at least the minimum requirement of information that will be required to help direct where we will go with measures. So I suppose I just turned on the overland flow pathway maps or layer on the EPA PIP maps, and you can see where the overland flow pathways are, where water start moving across, and we have our drainage network here, the purples and oranges and the green lines. So the kind of measures that we might be looking at here is hedgerows. So a hedgerow on a low mound can be very effective in just trapping a little bit of water behind it. particularly sediment-filled water and phosphorus-filled water. So there'll be an overland flow pathway measure. That's part of that. One of the measures that we're proposing to fund. Another kind of similar break the pathway or so the flow measure is low earthen mounds or bunds, where again, similar to the hedgerow, you just you have a mound that traps water behind it, detains it, lets the sediment settle out, lets the phosphorus settle out in the sediment, and then it will flow away over a period of time. So it's very good from in high rainfall events, and we tend to be getting a lot more of those. I suppose what's very important as well, and this is something that those of you are aware of, Donald Daly would be very much in favour of these spatially targeted riparian margins or riparian buffer zones or riparian areas, and this is where you're targeting specific areas to put in these riparian margins with the view to break that flow pathway again and to attenuate out phosphorus and sediment out of overland flow pathways. So this is your diffuse phosphorus issues primarily. And again, I suppose another kind of area that we'll be looking to do some funding for is around small wetland ponds, where they're suitable, and they will be small, and there won't be big massive ponds, but where they're suitable to maybe their retention of them as well, where they are already there in the landscape, but also then maybe putting in a new one that might capture sediment and water and help with biodiversity and greenhouse gases as well. A lot of times we see when we're out such volume of water and through drainage works upstream, and the water is getting down through the catches much quicker. It's coming with much more energy. It's undermining and damaging riverbanks. So, looking at riverbank supports or bank revetment kind of works where suitable will be also be funded. And then you're looking at the management of critical source areas. So areas of the farm where you have critical source areas that need to be managed in a specific way at specific times of the year to ensure that we don't have slurry going out in a field that might flood at a wrong period of time, that kind of thing. So we have measures for that. Also looking at prevention of cattle livestock or cattle access to watercourses and provision of complementary or alternative drinking supplies as well. And then some light engineering works around the lines of culverts or bridges. Now it's important to note that all these measures, while we will fund them, we do need to make sure that they're in compliance with whatever environmental requirements are out there, be it an SACs or SPAs or that kind of a thing, and also plan permission as well. So all those things would have to be boxes that have to be ticked before we can provide funding. So we won't be able to circumvent the legislation that's out there already. We found it very difficult to come up with a nitrogen measure, a nitrogen reduction measure, because typically they're nearly all legislated for via the derogation. But what we will put forward is a method of reducing the nitrogen surplus on farms or improving your nitrogen use efficiencies. And you're looking at getting a baseline for the current year or whatever year it is, and then you can take on a number of measures that will help reduce your overall nitrogen loading and improve your nitrogen use efficiency. So you're trying to reduce the headline figure of how much nitrogen is on the farm, that surplus on the farm, to reduce that down. So the less nitrogen surplus is there, the less nitrogen that's available to be leached. And this is where we see very much working in conjunction with the co-ops, that this will be very much part of their sustainability bonuses. And I suppose you could even stitch in a results base there where the greater reduction, the greater the bonus, something like that. So we're still in the very infancy of this and discussing with co-ops as to how this might actually work. So other measures there, I'll run through them quickly. Obviously, the cover catch crops and the tillage is very important in certain catchments, particularly from a nitrate leaching point of view. So we'll be looking at that. So it'll be similar to acres. We're looking at pesticides, so sprays and sheep dipping are problems in certain areas. So we'll have some measures there as well to help farmers in those areas. And then, water retention climate measures, Fran already mentioned those. So you're looking at swales and bunds and retention of water in streams and things like that, and drainage networks and things like that. Farm drain maintenance, is a problem in certain areas again as well, where you know over maintenance of farm drains is leading to excess sediment being lost, and then you know we'll have a look at trying to provide some best practice guidance and funding for that as well. And believe it or not, there's plenty of farms out there that are not in acres and not in derogation, that have never had soil samples or nutrient management plan done. So we'll provide some funding for soil samples, nutrient management planning where required. But also, while we have a good list there, there'll always be these bespoke measures that are very site specific and are suitable for maybe one-off in a certain farm or a certain location. And we will consider those as for funding as well. And the funding range will be from 100% of the cost to a percentage of the cost, depending on some of the things. So the more capital or the more costly ones, say, for example, the funding of a bridge or culvert, you know, we probably wouldn't be able to afford to give 100% of the cost there, but we will look to fund a percentage of that cost. So very quickly, we're running out of time here, but just an example that we might put forward. So this is the same map as I showed you earlier on. So cattle access to the stream along this side here is causing a problem. So we're going to fence off the watercourse and provide alternative drinking supply for the farmer. And then we have widespread diffuse water overland flow accessing the stream along here and this drain along here. So we're going to put a 3 meter linear riparian margin along there. We're going to have some spatially targeted riparian areas to head off where we have these overland flow pathways delivering water and nutrients and sediment. And then this critical source area here, we're going to have a critical source area management plan or field management for that. And a couple of, a bit of a hedgerow, maybe 50 meters of a hedgerow and 50 meters of a bund here to trap and to divide and conquer that water flow coming down there. So that's just a kind of an example of what typically if could be a farmer could decide to take on board. And then to put some costs with it, you know, your drinking points and stream fencing is the issue. So you have fencing of the water body and provision of alternative drinking supply. So you have your solar power drinking and single strand electric fence that comes to 365 meters in 1 unit. So you have your costs there. Peel loss through overland flow is the issue. So you have your linear riparian margin. You have your spatially target riparian areas at 0.2 of a hectare. You have your critical source area management, 1.8 hectares. You have your hedgerow and your earth and bund at costs like that. So, you know, the costings, I suppose, these are indicative ones at the minute. We haven't finalized. We're basing them primarily on other schemes like TAMS and acres that's out there, and other EIPs that have costings in there as well. So, as I said, these are just indicative at the minute, so don't go running off saying these are the finalized prices. They're not. It's just an indication of what is out there for farmers. So I suppose just to summarise and finish up, we know that we're not meeting our water quality targets. In ASSAP, we see that the implementation of measures is the key to realising water quality improvements, while we're getting very good engagement with farmers and farmers wanting to do measures. I suppose in certain cases, the blockage is the, you know, financial support for farmers to put these measures in. And this is why the EIP is there, to help try and undo that blockage. You know, so the provision of the funding is to address implementation of supplementary measures. It's not for measures that are already regulated. We have to develop the IT system, as I mentioned earlier on, so that's ongoing. We hope to run a pilot of the EIP in late September, early October. This will be a very small pilot, but just to obviously try and iron out any teething problems that would be there. And we're hopeful to have a tentative rollout in early 2024. So that's me, Pat.
Okay.
Any questions maybe is the next thing, isn't it?
If you just stop sharing there, there's a load of questions coming in, Shaun. And I suppose if Fran would join us again, I suppose just one thing, just to I think you've outlined and actually dealt with some of the questions that have been coming in. But I suppose an EIP is a European Innovation Partnership. The innovation that's in this. You might give us an idea of what is innovative about what the project is proposing.
You do that, Fran?
Okay. Yeah, just the scale of it to start with, in terms of what it's trying to achieve at a national level. The approach in terms of the idea of the rainwater management plan, taking that approach, it's a conceptual thing really, but it is a new way to look at it, and it brings in, I mentioned already, the climate thinking. So it's not just about looking at something in the static and the here and now. It's about trying to forecast as well and to get that thinking in there. So we're moving away from, let's say, just dealing with compliance issues to try and help people think about, what's actually going on, and to future-proof what's going on. So that's one of the innovations in terms of just the philosophy of the project, let's say. There's a number of different elements within the project that that we didn't have time to get into. So, for example, the communications element will be very much part of trying to help move the national conversation around this. There's a lot of discussion, as you well know, around the different sectors in terms of ambitions and meeting the EU requirements, etc., etc. This project attempts to bring it all back to kind of what's the real purpose here? Why are we trying to do this? Why is it important to protect water quality? So the communications will be building on the local experience, the local element, and that's why we'll have people embedded within community partnerships. We'll have an expression for an open call, asking community groups to apply to have a number of posts embedded within their community group. Like that could be anything from, say, for example, development companies. I don't want to start naming different groups, trusts, whatever, catchment partnerships, or whatever shape or form, as long as they work through in the principles of the project in terms of catchment science. We will have that a flexibility for them to look at their local context. So it could be a source protection issue. It could be a shellfish industry in terms of a coastal area. It could be a rare species, an iconic species that's an area is famous for. It could be, for example, say protecting spawning beds for salmon or whatever. So that that has never been done before like that, and that'll be very much integrated into it. Another innovation is around the whole research community. So rather than dipping into the 50 million, we felt no, that's for farmers. That's trying to get the stuff done on the ground, and we want to keep it separate. So then how do we manage, the evaluation, the research, all that type of stuff? So because of its scale, it's a huge opportunity for the research community to get involved. So we have over 6 research institutes have signed up to what we're calling the Research Hub. And the idea is to leverage funding that's out there through different funding streams, say, for example, through the EPA research grants, through the Department of Ag research, and then the international stuff like Horizon 2020, whatever, looking at, nature-based solutions, looking at I suppose some of the stuff that the project will be doing, right down to evaluation, some of the measures. So this is a question that we are concerned about: is how do you evaluate the measures? How do you prove it's working? At what level? The EPA have their monitoring points at scale. But in terms of getting in there and into the deeper area, we could spend a huge amount of the budget just on doing research. We felt no, that's not appropriate. We want to be smart about this, integrate what's going on. A lot of money has been spent by the public purse, and internationally that we can access to do this. So that's a huge piece as well. The other element, of course, is, and I'll stop with this one, is the industry. It's the first time ever that we've been able to reach out. Dairy industry are really coming in, building into sustainability plans around the bonus schemes, etc., and developing that. Here's a real opportunity, but also broaden it out, looking at the multiple benefits, bringing in the other areas of interest. So I mentioned the idea of complementarity. So the thinking is very much around that. So the learning of what's going on with the results-based programs, the burn and all that type of stuff, to bring that in where we can. But at the same time, these are targeted specific measures addressing, stuff that's come through, for example, the ASSAP program or whatever. So we're trying to blend the two and make it as efficient as possible. So on the IT side then as well, is to make it as streamlined as possible, so to cut out double form filling and all that type of stuff. And the other thing that we didn't mention is On Board BIA have agreed to come in as on the operations committee. So again, to integrate what we're doing and inform the whole sustainability process. So first time ever, I suppose, to do it in the round and bring in the various sectors right across ag, not just dairy, not just beef, not just tillage, but everybody in the round. So
So no shortage of innovation.
Yeah, I know we haven't even talked about some of the measures, but yeah. So
Shaun, a huge number of questions coming in there.
Yeah, a lot of questions coming in, Pat. I suppose I'll start with Noel. Two parts to this question. Are farmers being given enough time to improve water quality? I suppose is the first part. And the second part, do you consider the level of investment now sufficient for the amount of work that needs to be achieved over the next number of years?
Yeah, so I suppose the first one there, have they been given enough time? I suppose if you look at where we are with water quality, it was certainly there was a downward trend. It has stagnated now, or at least it has stopped declining. But the reality is that we have our targets for 2027 of good status. So time is running out, I suppose, maybe is the best way of putting it. Whether they have enough time or not to change it around is a good question. There are, of course, lag times and things like that to consider when we look at improving water quality. A lot of the measures, the regulatory measures, are there for a long period of time, and they've been strengthened quite significantly in the recent past, particularly for the derogation farmers and those areas. So I suppose maybe the argument is that maybe those haven't been given enough time to see how they have impacted, particularly from a nitrate loss point of view, and that's a fair argument. But I suppose the thing about it is we're running out of time. And this needs the urgency is really there, and I think it was reflected by the EC Commission or the European Commission decision there that when they gave the derogation, that they put a 2-year review with very stringent conditions that the EPA recently reported on, and that we unfortunately weren't able to meet. So the EU certainly see this as the time is up. We need to start moving very dramatically to get this. So I suppose it is a fair comment. Farmers do need time to react, and it does take time for lag times for water quality improvement and so on. But I suppose from probably the EC and maybe other people's view, time is very short now at this stage to get improvements. I forget what your second question was there, Shaun.
I suppose the level of investment, is it sufficient, for the amount of work that needs to be done over the next number of years?
Is that in relation to what we're providing in the EIP, is it, or is it in? Yeah. Look, what we're trying to do is, as I said, that the costings that I showed there. Look, we're taking our lead off TAMS, we're taking lead off acres, we're taking lead off other EIPs there. I suppose what we can see, what we can do is we can certainly see over time whether are those measures underfunded or are they funded right. And if we feel that they're underfunded, we can look at those again and see can we adjust those funding rates. But I suppose we do have 10 million a year. We're presuming around the $3,000 on average spend on a farm, the typical farm from based on what we have from the ASSAP. You're looking at maybe $3,500 a year then on that kind of a spend. So we have to try and manage the costs. It's very difficult to manage the costs on this one, and we're trying to manage them as best we can. We feel that the costs are fair. They're reflective of what's out there. I know inflation has gone through the roof, so maybe that might need to be adjusted slightly on the back of that. But we are trying to give a fair compensation to farmers to do these things.
Yeah, the next question, I suppose, Fran, the application process. How long and arduous do you see that rolling out? I suppose over the next, over a set period of time. There's a huge amount of work to be achieved and mitigation measures to be put in place. But how quickly would we expect a turnaround in application
from a farmer?
Yeah.
We haven't put an actual figure on it as such yet. We're still working through it because we're in discussions. We had a meeting yesterday actually to look at a process flow on the IT side. There's a bit to this, but the plan will be to make it a fast turnaround. I don't want to kind of give you a stake that you can beat us a bit later, but it will be. We're very much taking the approach of what is experience of advisors and farmers on the ground dealing with these types of schemes. So this has been at the very front of the thinking before we even started. Was we want to do something that's very efficient. So the idea and the hope will be that for example, the farm plan that could be agreed almost on the day with the farmer, with the walk around, you know, quick validation, and depending on what it is, and depending on the measure, you know, the payment would come in very quickly. Some, as Noel mentioned, you know, would only require like a photographic of like a validation to prove that it's been done. There may be, for the more sophisticated measures, a need for a visit, but it'd be quick, and hopefully quicker than the average schemes. But we have to remember, this is a big scheme. The ambition is up to 15,000, so we have to manage that on the, you know, from the point of view of the project management side. So I don't want to give it a set time frame, but as quick as possible, I guess, is what we're trying to do, and we're very conscious of this to try and get it right.
Yeah, two questions now. I'll group them together. You can decide which one wants to answer. But rented land, will rented land be eligible for payment under the EIP? And also, you know, if a farm puts in a physical feature such as a sediment pond or just a pond, you know, going forward, will there be a payment made for that physical feature on an annual basis, basically?
Right. I'll have a go at this one. So, yeah, is the answer to the rented ground, because that was one of the barriers that was identified for measures not going in. Obviously, that's will need the agreement of the landlord, for one better way of putting it. You know, so if a farmer is renting a bit of ground and he's happy to put in exclude livestock from a water course and put in an alternative drinking supply, and the landowner is happy, well then, yeah, we're happy to fund that. And Jesus, what was it again?
The ponds, you know.
Oh yeah, the retention of them. Yeah, look, the scheme is there for 5 years. So I mean, we won't have funds after that, you know. So I suppose we'll fund for the period of time that we can fund, but after that we won't be able to, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a question around there on you know, a lot of the mitigation measures were, you know, were heavily focused on surface pathways and, you know, stopping the flow of the pathways and so on. Are there any specific measures for subsurface pathways? I know you touched on it, Noel, there with, you know, the nitrous leaching and the, you know, reduction of nitrogen environments, but are there any specific for that?
Yeah, I suppose the easier ones to do something with is the phosphorus, is the overland flow pathways, and like you have a physical barrier, they're much easier to verify and to pay for, because they're physical, you can see them, they're there or they're not, kind of thing. I suppose with the subsurface, so you're probably looking at nitrate leaching. So, you know, we have, from a tillage point of view, we have the cover and catch crops ones. And then we're looking to try and source control, I suppose, is a phrase. We're trying to reduce the source loading of nitrogen on these nitrogen risky lands. But, you know, going beyond that, you're probably into, you know, denitrification barriers and things like that. And I suppose that's when it starts getting complicated. I'm not sure we have enough knowledge and resources within the EIP to be able to administer for those and to judge how effective they are and whether they're in right and where they should go and the locations and all that kind of thing. So I suppose we've gone more so for the break the pathway physical ones for phosphorus and sediment. The nitrogen one, as I said, was we were finding it quite difficult to come up with nitrogen measures, apart from primarily the tillage, catch crops, cover crops, and trying to reduce the source loading on vulnerable areas, and that's kind of as far as we're probably going to go with those ones, you know.
Noel, there's a question there about the efficiency and I suppose the possibility under the scheme of a group of farmers coming together in the EIP. Is that something that will be considered, or is it just for individual farmers?
Well, look, at if you know, we'd often get I'm sure people have often heard, you know, I have my side of the river fenced off and the farmer on the other side hasn't his side of the river fenced off, and sure, what's the point? You know, his cattle are going in and mine are out. So I think, you know, if we could get that community farmer buy-in to implement measures like that, it'd be much more effective and much better. And like, I suppose Fran kind of touched on it there a little bit. You're looking at kind of a community-based thing where you're saying, right, we have a river here, lads, and there used to be trout in it when I was a young lad, and now they're all gone, and maybe we'll try and do something about it. We'll all club together, we'll all do whatever the appropriate measures are that we can get funding through the EIP, and hopefully we'll see benefits of that. So look, we would certainly encourage that, and do our best to facilitate that and to help along with that, So, certainly things like the fencing off and, a solar power drinker, you're certainly not going to give 10 lads along the line solar power drinkers. So you're probably looking at maybe one between 3 or 4, or whatever the sizing might allow you for. So I suppose that's kind of where we would encourage groups of farmers to come together, that we could put in measures that would have scale, has bigger effect obviously than individuals. So if we could get scale, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and maybe a question there, Fran, on the success of the of the EIP and so on. You touched on it earlier. How will that be monitored, or will there be an inspection element in departments, or how will that roll out?
Well, because it's a European innovation project, there will have to be an audit done anyhow, just in terms of making sure the money's been appropriately spent. So that will happen. That will be a requirement. So we have to make sure that we satisfy the EU rules. But within the project itself, yeah, I mean the project team, let's say if the advisors that we've taken on by the project team will have half the number of farmers to visit, because half their time is going to be taken up with doing that validation to making sure that things are working, as well as doing making sure we don't that we take into account Natural 2000 sites and the other, let's say, protected area requirements and that. But yeah, there will be that'll be built into the project, and that's the research hub I mentioned already, and that will look into some of that in terms of the more sophisticated assessments. But a lot of the actual, in terms of at the farm scale, it will be about being able to demonstrate that the measure has gone in appropriately, and then I mean the overall ambition will be that this project will be working in partnership with all the other I suppose moving parts of the Water Framework Directive that in terms of managing our landscapes. Ultimately, the EPA monitoring points are the ultimate arbitrator and this in terms of the assessment. But yeah, we will be doing it at a more fine scale.
There's a comment in here. I noticed that county councils do not appear to be included. You may not have explained what LAWPRO is, but there's also, I suppose, the question of working actively with the local councils as part of the project. You might deal with that, Fran.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. It's a very good question, and sometimes we do find, runoff from roads causing, challenges for farmers in terms of their drains and stuff getting blown out. So we are conscious of that, and going forward with climate change, we're going to see more of this. So runoff from hard surfaces, whether it's a road or a car park or a building, is something that we're very conscious of. So yeah, Pat, as I said, the local authority, we are a local authority service, but we're unique in that we engage with all sectors, and that's very much what we're about. So the learnings, we're like the helicopter that flies over Ireland and kind of goes, okay, where can we address the different issues. So the learnings that we take from the urban, we apply to the rural, and vice versa. So it's really good. But specifically on the roads and that, it is an area that we're working on, and we are working with the local authorities on this. We've got a nature-based solutions initiative that the Department of Housing are leading, and we're supporting that. And at the moment, the local authorities are putting together their local authority climate action plans. And within those plans, planning for climate change, resilience, drought, floods, etc. That's very much part of that. So we're in there. We're part of that conversation. So we're going to have to start looking at our tertiary roads, our primary routes, etc. Not just our motorways in terms of how we manage water. So yeah, so it's great to see that we have so many different disciplines working together. So we can kind of, I suppose, learn from each other and share experiences. But yeah, we are very mindful of that, and we are engaging, at the appropriate, level, including with the Department of Transport on this,
Okay, I'm sorry that we're going to have to go. We have a lot more questions, but our time is up. So I'd like to thank Noel, Fran and Shaun.
Josh, could I just, before we close off, sorry, we will be recruiting. Sorry, just to say to people, we will be recruiting posts for the project team. So, so we will have a number of posts from the DIT side, communications, but also the advisory side. In terms of, they'd be very exciting positions. I better do this out here. These are really good. Working with a really nice team, LAWPRO and ASSAP and Noel and all the guys. We're all, all very nice people. Great work environment. And it's a very exciting space. So look, we will be recruiting. So just keep an eye out on jobs.ie or just reach out to us if you are interested. And if you are involved in community groups, whatever, again, we will be doing that expression of interest thing as a call. And look, I would just say, if you don't mind, Pat, I'm like a broken record on this. What's this about? Why are we doing it? It's about water quality for everybody. So you can look at it. It doesn't matter where you come from, but at the end of the day, humans are intelligent. We can do this if we all work together. So I just want to finish, if you don't mind, on that, Pat. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. I think in whatever number of episodes we've had, that's the first commercial break we've had. Next week we'll be joined by our colleagues from the Farming from Rathcrone EIP on preserving the past and protecting the future, and it'll be Dr. Daniel Curley and Richie Farrell will be joining us. I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank all of you who have joined us. We've had a huge crowd here this morning, considering that it's bank holiday weekend in August, and thank you for your continued support, which makes, I suppose, the continuation of this podcast possible, or the webinar possible. So thank you very much. Hopefully we'll see you again next week. Enjoy your bank holiday weekend, and for those of you who are on leave, enjoy your break and your holiday. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.